Welcome to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping Orange County. With your host, Don Camber.
Hello, live from the OC Talk Radio studios at UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Don Camber with another great guest impacting our community in a positive way. Today, I welcome Managing Director, Wealth Management at UBS in Newport Beach, Ed Levin. UBS is a leading global wealth manager. It offers investment solution, products, and impactful thought leadership, provides large-scale and diversified asset management, focused investment banking capabilities, and personal and corporate banking services. Thank you, Ed, for being on Impact OC.
Well, thanks for having me, Don. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Ed, I understand that in addition to having been a financial advisor for 30-plus years, you also regularly work with the Jewish Community Foundation of Orange County and other local nonprofit organizations regarding financial considerations. Please explain your philosophy and how you help these organizations.
So that's a good place to start, but I want to go backwards one step. And I think that the key is being engaged with an organization where you really want to be involved, where you are passionate about their mission. And being involved with the Jewish Community Foundation Orange County and some other organizations, these are things that are very important to me and to my family. The way that I get involved with them quite often is starting with the finance committee, making sure that they're financially and fiscally responsible. The governance group, which also is an area that helps with the longevity of organizations. And by starting in these two areas and making sure that that they have policies and procedures in good places, this allows them to have a long life and to fulfill their mission. And ultimately, that's what I want to be able to do, is to help organizations like these be involved in their mission and accomplish their goals.
What do you find issues that are problematic?
So this is the problem. A lot of organizations start as a mom and pop. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 people involved as volunteers, and then they grow into a much larger organization. But they haven't updated their policies, procedures, or maybe their financial record keeping. So a lot of times when I get involved, or other people, there's a number of other people who do it as well, we have to change the books from maybe it's a simple bookkeeping system to something that's more robust, make sure that there's auditors involved. And ultimately, an organization like the Jewish Community Foundation, it is the shepherd of other people's assets. We are holding, well over $100 million worth of other people's donations or monies, organizations as well as individuals. So we're responsible to make sure that it's properly accounted for and invested and so on, and making sure that the financial record keeping is robust and that there's auditors in place. This ensures that's the case.
With that said, do you believe a lot of organizations are doomed to fail because they do not have somebody looking out for them like you do for some of your nonprofits?
I would say that today, if an organization does not have these policies and procedures in place, it's unlikely that they're going to get serious financial dollars donated to them or invested in them from philanthropists. So I think that a lot of organizations have gotten better. There's one that I've recently gotten involved with where they had some problems, and they brought in auditors before I got involved, and they've totally redone their financial record keeping system. But it was a little bit lazy-hazy for a few years. And it was mostly, one family that was providing all the financial resources. As they wanted to broaden that and get other people involved, they needed to put new procedures in place. And that's now in place, and it's allowing them to flourish.
What kinds of procedures are you talking about?
It could be something as simple as making sure that the record keeping is up to date. If someone donates, they write a check for $1,000, record that properly, send them out a thank you note, which is ultimately it's a record keeping that they need in order to write it off on their tax return, but it also ensures that the monies are accounted for and there's oversight to how the money is spent. It's really easy for someone to say, it's a board meeting tonight, let's take everyone out to dinner. That's probably not the right thing to do with the financial resources of a nonprofit. But in the way that you make sure that things like that don't happen is by having oversight of the books. So it's not just one person who is responsible, but there's multiple people who review it. So at the Jewish Community Foundation Orange County, one of the things that we put in place a number of years ago was an audit committee. There was a finance committee, which I chaired for a number of years, and we put in place an audit committee that overlooked what we did, as well as the staff within the admin team on the finance side. So there were multiple layers of financial oversight to ensure that our clients' dollars were appropriately accounted for.
Well, how can nonprofits survive in these crazy, volatile markets?
Wait a minute, the markets are volatile? I didn't realize that. So, that's a good question. And I think that, it's similar to what our organizations are doing are very similar to what our private clients are doing within my practice at UBS. It's really about thinking long-term and planning long-term. A lot of times we get hung up on what the market is doing today or tomorrow, but really we're investing, if it's for an individual multi-generational family or for a nonprofit, we're investing for the next 10, 20, 30, or maybe 100 years. Once again, the Jewish Community Foundation Orange County, it's a multi-generational organization that should be around for 100, 200 years. So what happens in the market today is not as important as what happens over the next 10 and 20 years. And that's the same thing for our clients in our group. So having said all that, what do we do about that? We make sure that their investment allocation and their asset allocation is appropriate, right? It's all about how much risk do you need to meet your goals, not having too much risk or too little risk. And if that's with a multi-generational family or if that's with an organization, the same principle applies. And then you have to go and review that on a regular basis. And by regular, I mean probably quarterly or semi-annual, not every week. This is not day trading. We're not looking to make changes on a regular basis. We're looking long-term. And by looking long-term, it allows us to move away from the volatility that we're seeing today and to be, successful over decades.
What should nonprofits ask themselves in order to be financially viable into the future?
So I think that one of the most important things for an organization to look at is what is their spending rate, meaning how much do they need to have every year in order to keep the doors open and fulfill their mission. And once you know that number, you can back into how much can be in an endowment and how much you're raising every year. And let me unpack that for a moment. So if an organization fundraises every year for their entire budget, they're doomed to fail in bad years. And so this year is probably a good example of that. Some organizations did not see the funding that they would have liked because the stock market was down, the bond market was down. People did not feel as wealthy this year as they may have in the prior year. Next year may be another difficult year. People are very focused on what their homes are worth, and home values have come down a little bit, and they may not be rising the way that they have. So as people feel less wealthy, some are inclined not to give as much. So that hurts nonprofits that are reliant on donations in the current year. What we recommend at the foundation, as well as within other organizations that are similar to that, we recommend that they have an endowment that covers a lot of their annual costs, as well as some fundraising for annual expenses. And there's a fine line between the two, and for every organization, it's going to be a little bit different of an answer of what percentages in each. But the more that you can have endowed, so that it's maybe a 3, 4, 5% that you're taking off every year, that's going to ensure your longevity. And once again, you're not going to worry about the markets. You're not going to worry about, did we fundraise enough this year or this month or today, because you really can look much longer term because you know the funding is there.
I want you to define endowment.
So an endowment is a fund of monies that typically are donated by individuals that are put aside and are invested in an appropriate asset allocated strategy that throws off income and capital gains over the long term. At the Jewish Community Foundation, we have a policy of distributing around 4% on an annual basis. Some of our clients can take out a little bit more, but it's a 3-year rolling average that we take 4%. And the reason that we use a 3-year rolling average is because it eliminates a year like this where maybe the fund is down 15, 20% in value. And we're looking at last year, which was a good year, and the prior year, which is a good year. So we're looking at the long term. But an endowment is a pool of money that is there for the long term to provide support for that organization. And within our private clients, within our practice at UBS, it's the same principle, right? We're looking long term for those investors, and their endowment basically is the money that they want to leave maybe to charity, or they want to leave to their kids or other beneficiaries, but it's money that provides for their support now while they're alive, but it's their legacy for the future.
Is that what the key is, to keep nonprofits in existence for long term? Is creating an endowment?
Certainly so. And it's difficult for a lot of organizations to do it because they're thinking about, how am I going to pay the bills today? Let's say that an organization has $1 million a year budget to fulfill their mission. And then we say, okay, but go raise $5 million this year so that you can have $4 million in your endowment and $1 million to fund your goals and your objectives this year. And then next year you'll have $4 million throwing off, let's say, 4%, and that's going to cover a portion of the amount of money that you need for the total year. But the more that endowment grows, the less you're reliant on current year donations. And the reason that that's a problem, once again, is because in years like this, where the markets are down, people aren't feeling as wealthy, maybe, God forbid we have it, but another pandemic or something, people may not be in a position to give. It allows the organization to pull on those resources to still be able to fulfill their mission no matter what the economic environment is like.
How can they set it up?
There's a lot of ways to do it. It starts with an attorney who can set up an endowment. It's not that difficult. At the Jewish Community Foundation Orange County, we have a number of organizations that come to us, and we take care of all the paperwork for them and things like that. In the non-Jewish community, there's the Orange County Community Foundation. There's a lot of different organizations around that can help a nonprofit set up a foundation. And by the way, I threw out $4 million. Some organizations have an endowment of $50,000. It all depends on what the mission of that organization is, and that endowment grows over time. It's pretty unusual for an organization to start with an endowment at $4 million unless they have some really very generous contributors who want to invest in that organization long term, but it's something that grows over time. And so I think the perfect world, when we ask someone to make a donation to an organization, we'll say, hey, can we take 50% of it for the current year and 50% of it for the future? And then we ask those people really to invest in the future, and quite often they're generous, and that's something that they want because they believe in the organization, so they're happy to hear that the organization is thinking long-term as well.
And you're talking transparency.
Oh, 100% transparency. There's no reason not to have everything be out in the open. And frankly, this goes back to the audit committee I talked about earlier and having financial controls in place. For any organization worth its mettle, you want to be able to see their financial records, and you want to be able to see some sort of rating. Within our clients at UBS, we do a lot of work with them in their charitable contributions. And quite often, a client will call up and say, hey, I want to give money to XYZ. Do you know anything about it? At UBS, we have a vast network of people who can help with questions like that and help our clients decide how they want to give money, the most efficient way to give it, and things like this. And so we have the resources to stop and say, do you want to give $1 million to an organization that only has an annual budget of $1,000 or $100,000? That's a gross exaggeration. But sometimes those types of conversations do come up, and we stop and we say, let's look at the financial transparency. Let's look at their books. And if they have no audited records, and if they provide no what amounts to a tax form, it's called a 990, if they don't file them, that's probably not an organization that we're going to recommend our clients consider funding.
And why do people donate to these organizations?
Because they believe in them. Right? Now, sometimes that may be Save the Whales of Santa Monica Bay. Sometimes it may be something as specific as rescue animals, or a church, a synagogue, a mosque. It could be all types of organizations, but I would say more often than not it's because someone believes in that organization. I mean, I've seen some of your shows, and right, some of the organizations that you've like spoken to are ones that my wife and I have donated to, and it's like amazing some of the same type of organizations. And, so something like Orangewood, right? We have an adopted daughter. She did not go through Orangewood, but, absent other situations that could have been where she was. My wife is a mentee to someone who was in the Orangewood program, probably from 7-8 years ago. She graduated out of it, but that's an organization that provides unbelievable services, right? And so it touched us, which is why we write them a check, and that's why people give to organizations, because it's something that touches them. And sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's the kid down the street who says, I'm in this marathon raising money for whatever, and you say, okay, here's $50 or whatever it may be. But it's because we give to people who ask us, right? People give to people, and it's always starting with something that we care about.
And not to get anything in return, but just to feel good for donating.
Correct.
Now, the heart of many nonprofits is fundraising. And I'm sure you've seen some people do it correctly and some people do it incorrectly. I want you to share with me what people do incorrectly.
So I'm going to give away a secret here. I'm going to first say the right thing to do, and that's asking someone respectfully, right? And not so the other side of that is guilting them into it, right? And I've been fortunate to ask people for literally tens of millions of dollars to fundraise for nonprofits. And inevitably, every single time, the person says to me, thanks, Ed, for asking me for that $1 million, right? And it's because, once again, it's going to something that they're really passionate about, and they want to fund, if it's a school, a religious organization, a hospital, whatever it may be, it's something they're passionate about. So they want to be involved in helping to see that it's successful. And they will thank you when it's done right. When it's done wrong, you're guilting them into it. And you're saying, Arnie over there gave $1 million. How come you're too cheap to do it? That doesn't go over well. Sometimes you'll still get the donation, but the person is going to resent it. And that's not good for the health of the organization. Because frankly, if someone gives $1 million, they probably can give $2. And so you want to be able to go back to them at a later date and say, look at what we built over here. And it has your name on it. Look at all the good that we're doing. And you stay in contact with them and you say, this is the impact you've made on all these people's lives. That's something that's really important. And by the way, it's not a donation as much as someone investing in that organization, that they want to see it succeed. And they're investing in its success. And in that regard, it's the same thing as investing in a strategy in an investment portfolio. And, you do it the right way with transparency. You do it with explaining everything that you're trying to do, and people are going to thank you for it.
So perhaps change the word donation to investing.
So one of our clients said that to me probably 6-8 weeks ago. I called him up he asked me to check out an organization, and I said, well, you can give to this. He goes, I'm not giving to them. I'm investing in them. And that changed the mindset for me. I've been involved in nonprofits for probably longer than I want to admit, but probably going on 40 years. And, it's the first time that I really thought that's the right way to focus on it, it's investing.
You must feel wonderful for what you do.
It's fun. I always we were talking about retirement earlier. I'm not ready to retire. I'm not old enough to do that. But I think that when I do retire, what I want to do is sit above my garage and give money away to organizations that I believe in and to volunteer at those organizations, be involved. I think that it's very rewarding to give back. I feel very blessed for the lifestyle that I have and the healthy family and everything else. And this is one of the ways that we can give back.
But many of them have fundraising events, and sometimes they spend a lot of money on the event versus what they bring in. What is the proper ratio of what you spend on an event versus what you take in?
The organizations I like, first of all, I'm not a big fan of these fundraising events. I'd rather go out to dinner with the friends that we would see there and have a good evening and just write a check. But These events are really important because it allows people to find out about an organization that maybe they wouldn't have known about. So my wife and I were invited by some friends to the Tilly's Life Center event, fundraiser, probably a month and a half ago. And it's an amazing organization helping children in high schools deal with mental health issues. It's amazing. So I never would have known anything about this. I'd heard about it from some friends who said they'd gone to a fundraiser or they knew Tilly, the woman who started it. But this event allowed us to find out about it. So the answer to your question, though, the right amount is zero. None of the money that you donate should go to it in the best of worlds. And that's in the case of Tilly's and a lot of other organizations, it was underwritten by board members or other people who gave money specifically for that fundraiser. At the Jewish Community Foundation Orange County, we have our annual event on Thursday night this week. And it's not a fundraiser per se, but it's a way of showcasing the organization, letting people know what we're doing and give an update to the community. It's completely underwritten by sponsors. There's no money that's coming out of the organization to pay for that. So I think that the right answer is zero of the dollars that you donate go to that. That's not always the case. The organizations that I'm more likely to support are those where it's fundraised privately.
But what if they have to spend money to do it? Is there some formula, ratio?
I don't want to say that there's a ratio just for that event. Let's look at it at the part of the bigger picture, right? So organizations have to file, if they're compliant, they're 990, which is this IRS form. And through there, you can tell how much they're spending on fundraising and how much they're spending on programs, administration, travel, perks, things like that. And you can also get some of this information at Charity Navigator, which is a great site, or GuideStar to track some of these organizations. The organizations that 95, 96% go towards programming, that's great. If 60, 70% goes to fundraising, that's backwards, right? I don't want to say that there's a rule of thumb. The smaller the amount that goes to fundraising, the better. The reason I don't want to say there's a rule of thumb is sometimes the line between fundraising and programming it's gray. And so it's better to have it be less, but some organizations have to spend a fair amount of money to raise money.
We're in a period of time where people can easily get scammed. How can people avoid it?
Do your homework. It's that simple. It's just like if someone sends you a text message saying, "Hi, I'm from Amazon and I don't have your right address or credit card number. Can you give it to me, please?" The lights are going to go on and you're going, maybe not. It's the same thing with a nonprofit.
How can people reach you?
I'm at ed.levin@ubs.com or UBS in Newport Beach. But I want to say I'm in the phone book, but I don't think there's a phone book anymore. But, there's lots of ways to find me or, frankly, a good financial advisor.
Thank you, Managing Director, Wealth Management at UBS in Newport Beach, Ed Levin, for being on Impact OC. And I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Dawn Camber. Have an impactful day.
You've been listening to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping our community. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.